Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 506.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because I know you are trying to build your business. In fact, many of you have gone the extra mile. You've got your business going, and you've got tens, dozens, and some of you hundreds of employees. And you're like, man, how on earth am I going to keep doing all those things that I want to do? I'm saying this because we all start our business for many different reasons, and ultimately, it's usually because there's something else we want to achieve, and usually the business is not the end goal in and of itself, and we want to become a well-rounded person or do many different things, and that's exactly what I think we should all do. For some of us, we're motivated for many different reasons to be the best version of ourselves on this particular earth while we are here. And at the end of the day, we express that with business as well as some various art forms and who knows what else. I have with me today someone who has definitely dabbled, mastered, and expressed himself in so many different ways that I think you guys are going to not only be interested, but also intrigued, because through the process, what it comes down to is where you start isn't necessarily where you stay, and ultimately, if you can find a way to do good and do well at the same time, I think that's kind of the life we're all looking for. I have with me today none other than Frank McKinney. He is a real estate artist and international best-selling author. I believe it is a total of 6 books. And what's amazing isn't necessarily just what he has been able to do in the real estate world, but it's amazing that he has a heart for people as well. What I mean by that, many of you may have heard of Caring House Project. And if you have, then you already know that they have sheltered over 12,000 children and built 27 self-sufficient villages. And at the end of the day, you know that he's making a difference. And I think that's what we all want to leave behind. So I hope you are ready to learn. I hope you're ready to listen, because I think you and I, we're going to be able to glean some very important information from none other than Frank McKinney. Frank, how you doing?
I couldn't be doing better today, Jay. As we were talking before we got started, where am I coming to you from? Where am I speaking to you from today? Even though this is the radio or this is a podcast, you know where I'm coming to you from.
I know, right? And not everybody gets to do that in a treehouse, which I think, first of all, is awesome.
Let's set the stage for your listeners. I am talking to you from my oceanfront treehouse that has 12 windows, looks out over the Atlantic Ocean here from Delray Beach, Florida. It's got a bathroom, a sink, a shower, a king-size bed, all in a tiny, compact 220 square feet. But Jay, it's where I wrote all 6 of my best-selling books in 5 different genres, and I design all of our oceanfront mansions that I build on speculation. So you know what? Where we start today, everybody needs a place that draws out their creativity and their ingenuity, because that's what gets you ahead in business. It's not what industry you in or what you do for a living. It's how creative and ingenious you are at the way you do it. When I built this treehouse, I hadn't written a book, Jay, until I built this treehouse, and now I've got 6 in 5 different genres.
I love it. I love it. All right. Now, this being your first time here, I have to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody else the first time that they're here. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, etc. Because I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. For example, as an entrepreneur, occasionally I can envision myself running around town using our products and services and saving our customers one sale at a time. And yes, I'm probably wearing a cape or some tights at that moment. Also, like a superhero, an entrepreneur has a beginning. So, for example, if you think about, say, Spider-Man, there was a time where he was just a kid going to school, doing his thing, and, taking some photos. And then one day he gets bit by a spider, discovers that, hey, I've got a superhuman ability here. So now I get to choose whether to use it for good or for evil. So my question to you is as follows. Before the 6 books, before the treehouse, before all of the designs, before the ultra marathons, before everything that people know you for today, what we want to know is, who is Frank McKinney?
If he were a superhero, back in the day when I grew up in Indiana, a small little corn-fed town called Carmel, Indiana, or corn-fed country boy from Carmel, Indiana, Willy Wonka. I mean, that's really that comes to mind. And as we speak about that if you read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, it's the best marketing book ever written. Of course, you don't read the book from that perspective, nor do you watch the movie from that perspective. But if you think about it, you have a guy who caused the world to work itself up into a frenzy and buy millions and millions of chocolate bars because of his passion, his uniqueness, his eccentricity, his marketing savvy. And when I watched that movie, the movie came out in 1971. When I watched that movie for the first time, I said, I want to be that when I grow up. And you know what? When I combine Willy Wonka with Robin Hood, I don't steal from the rich, but I build beautiful houses with an average selling price of $14 million on speculation, meaning I build them without a buyer in mind, and like the Field of Dreams, hope a buyer will come, sell them for that money, and then we go and we take the money that we earn from the sale and we build self-sufficient villages in Haiti, just like Robin Hood would take from the rich and give to the poor. So those would be who Frank was before he sat up in a treehouse and wrote 5 books. I mean, he really, and this is great. It's a great question. I'm glad you opened with that, because I think we should, well, let me back up. Motivation washes off and goes down the drain with the soap at night. Doesn't last. So don't beat yourself up over the fact that motivation doesn't last. Inspiration lasts about as long as a bad sunburn. In other words, maybe a week after you've been in the sun too long, it dissipates. But aspiration, Jay, and all of Jay's listeners, will alter your DNA forever, changing your life and the lives of those you love. So first question, who do you aspire to emulate? Who do you aspire to emulate that you look up to? It's a fun exercise. And getting to the root of your first question, Jay, I aspired to emulate a number of people in my life, but early on, it was fictional characters close to being to me, Willy Wonka is a superhero. I aspired to emulate Willy Wonka. I aspired to emulate Robin Hood. I aspired to emulate Evel Knievel. I aspired to emulate, many people that had they not been real people, they would have been superheroes. Like, you could have written them in a comic book as a superhero. So I know it's a mouthful, but if I could ask you to focus on one thing, motivation washes off and goes down in the drain with the soap at night. Inspiration lasts about as long as a bad sunburn, but aspiration will alter your DNA, forever changing your life and those of you love, those of you that you love. And Jay, I've only aspired to be a handful of things my entire life. That's it.
Now,
That's it.
Yeah, what's interesting is I can definitely say you're the first to ever mention Willy Wonka as a superhero. That's a new one. Can you elaborate a little bit more for us?
Well, because listen, he was a fictional character. So are all superheroes. Right. They actually had these supernatural powers. To me, Wonka had a supernatural power in what? Marketing. Genius. Do you remember the scene in the movie, either the one with Gene Wilder or with later on when it was remade with Johnny Depp, when the factory workers were just opening up box after box looking for the golden ticket? Well, to get the box to open up the golden ticket, you had to buy the chocolate. And he created that intrigue. He created that want, that desire. I do that with my oceanfront mansions. I do exactly that for the ultra wealthy buyer who can afford my artistry, my three-dimensional artistry that you can live in. And I maybe it was something that, just stuck with me after I saw that movie for the first time and then probably 10 times thereafter. And it works. It works. It means, yeah, Superman and Spider-Man, and maybe the Punisher would be one that is kind of a cool comic book character that kind of is a vigilante and does things his own way. But Willy Wonka is a kinder version of that.
Got it. I like I said, I just needed to know more because no one has ever even posited him as a potential superhero. So that was new. So quick trivia question then. Which version is better, Wilder or Depp?
Wilder.
That was no hesitation. So that's
Wilder.
Cool. Yeah.
Unequivocally. Yeah.
Got it. So everybody, if you haven't seen
and I'm a big fan of Johnny Depp. I mean, I really am. I think he did a great job, but that maybe it's because, you see that movie once and you see it as a young kid, you never forget it. But as I've grown up, I don't want to sound like I'm obsessed on Willy Wonka. As I've grown up, I've read the book. I mean, yes, I've watched it, but reading the book, and I'm often asked. I was asked by Oprah, "What's your favorite book of all time? What's your best marketing book of all time?" And I said, "Charlie and the Chocolate Factory," because it really is. If you can read it in all of an hour. I mean, it's a skinny little book. I really encourage your listeners to pick up that book and read it with a marketing mind, a marketing bent.
Got it. I think that is by far the most unique assignment that has ever been given to the listeners from any of our episodes, which I absolutely love. Now, let's talk about this, though, because real estate is something that, people aspire to, for sure, think about a lot. But yet you're probably in one of the most fringe pieces of it by being the speculative, oceanfront, all of these things. I understand that that's your thing. But do you just wake up one day and go, you know what? That's what I want to do. What's the journey? How do you get there?
Of course not. We have to start small because we start small because we have no other choice because we don't have any money to start big. And we start small by buying, fixing up, and selling houses worth less than $100,000. The first 5 years of my career, I did not do a project worth more than $100,000. And this is in South Florida. So you're talking crack house. You are buying crack houses and fixing them up. And before flip was even a word, this was in the 80s. I was the late 80s. I was buying houses, fixing them up and flipping them, all of them worth less than $100,000. Now, if your listeners are a fan of Malcolm Gladwell, of which I am, he's a fantastic author. In Gladwell's book, Blink, he talks about to be an expert at anything in life, you have to put in
10,000 hours.
10,000 hours. And 10,000 hours, I did the math, is 5 years full-time. 40 hours a week times 50 weeks a year is 2,000. 2,000 times 5, 10,000. 5 years full-time. I read Gladwell's book a couple summers ago, and I did a kind of a post-mortem, and I thought, oh my goodness. I mean, okay, 10,000 hours. So from the first $50,000 crack house that I flipped to when I got onto the ocean, Jay, it was 5 years. So what I did is I became an expert at the craft, not the business of, but the craft of real estate. When I say craft, it's because I'm going to give your listeners another, not assignment, but a suggestion. Approach your business like a craft, like an artist would approach their craft. I'm a real estate artist. I'm the only one that I know of that creates three-dimensional art that you can live in on a sun-drenched canvas, really, known as the Atlantic Ocean. So for those first 5 years, yes, it was learning the craft and learning how to buy the property right and learning how to fix it up right. And of course, learning the marketing tricks and things that really have worked for me. And then I jumped from a $100,000 house, not to a $200,000 or a $300,000, but I jumped to a $2.2 million house. And if you think about how would Van Gogh, Renoir, Monet, Manet, any of the Michelangelos of the world, how do they approach their craft of truly either impressionist art or abstract art? they're perfectionists. They don't go to the art store and buy the cheapest paints and the cheapest canvas and the cheapest paintbrush. That's how a lot of people in real estate, especially investors, approach the business. Let's cut corners. Let's go buy the cheapest carpet. Jay, when I was doing crack houses, they were the nicest little crack houses on the block when I was done.
No doubt.
They were $15 a yard carpet instead of 10. They were 3 coats of paint instead of 2. They were a new roof instead of just patching the hole in the roof. I made them nice.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got good at the craft. So to me, it wasn't a big deal to jump from doing a $75,000 house to a $2 million house. It's just an extra zero. I mean, really, if you think about it, it's just adding a zero to the end of the asking price. And so that's, and then since 1992, Jay, that's all I have done is direct oceanfront homes. You're right, it is a niche. It's a very small niche. And my bank initially took that same approach. Like, Frank, come on.
Right.
Why would we lend money to you? Because there's so few oceanfront homes in South Florida to begin with, and there's so few people that can afford them.
Yeah.
And they're right. They're right. And here was my response. And this is the response I want people to take to your business. You can take the same approach. So if there are own, this is a true number, if there are 50,000 people in the world that have a net worth that can afford my average selling price, which is $14 million. It's the average. I'm doing a $20 million house now. I've done less expensive, but the average over all those 25 years has been $14 million. So there's 50,000 people that can afford what I do for a living. How many houses are there out there like mine going out after those 50,000 people? Very few, Jay. Very few. I know how many around the world. I know exactly. In a temperate location, by the way, on the beach in Florida. If you want to live on the beach in South Florida, Frank McKinney and a handful of, not even a handful of other people, less than a handful of other competitors, you can go to. So I love my chances with those 50,000. I have almost a monopoly.
That's a different way of looking at it. Definitely, for sure. Now, let me ask this question, though, because I think there's something that I want to highlight for everybody, because you said it, and I think it's really important for everyone to catch it. Because when you take real estate and you call it an art and a craft, crafts are something we honestly we are okay with. The mental psychological understanding of craft requires practice. It means you're going to be improving. You're never really done learning how good it goes. I think there's and if you think about it, there are other industries, doctors, for example, where they call them practices. Lawyers get to practice, doctors get to practice, and those things have, both of those have great impact. But I think there's a lot of pressure around getting it right when it comes to real estate. But by you calling it a craft, I think that it actually has given you an advantage in terms of being able to experiment and possibly make a few errors in judgment. What would you say? Hello there, entrepreneur. This is Jay Massey. I know that if you've ever gone over to the site, cashflowdiary.com, you may have asked yourself, where on earth do you get a domain name from? Especially as you are beginning to build your bigger, better, badder business, you need a web presence. You need the email address. You need a way for people to contact you electronically so that you can stop doing the @gmail.com game. Well, the good folks over at GoDaddy have definitely supplied us with every domain that we have ever used. So what I want you to do is I want you to go over to trygodaddy.com/cashflowdiary. Again, that's trygodaddy.com/cashflowdiary, because it's a quick way for you to get set up to capture your domain name the exact way that you want it. They got easy search functions, and most importantly for you is that you'll be up and running today. As I said, once you get started, stay started. Don't let small little obstacles of how to get your own domain name going stop you. So again, go to trygodaddy.com/cashflowdiary, and let's get back to the rest of the story.
I would say that's true, because most folks that enter this industry, I'm going to speak from the investment side, okay, not the brokerage side or the building side, but as an investor, for some reason are conditioned to see a spreadsheet. You're instantly conditioned to see, how can I squeeze and wring out every dime on the bottom line? I took the opposite approach very early in my career, Jay. Even going back to those crack houses and early, fixer uppers and flippers, I made them the nicest house on the block. And I know this is radio, so you can't see what I'm doing with my two finger, my thumb and my index finger. But I'm going to compress my margin, right? I'm
Yeah.
making it smaller and smaller because I spent more money. But I'm going to grow my thumb and my index finger wider because what did I grow? My reputation. I grew my reputation. So my margins were thin at the beginning. My reputation grew in the end. And if you think about the great, I mean, use the artist again, the great artists of the world, I'm sure their first paintings were hardly worth anything. But they, over time, even in their lifetime, they made good money by growing that reputation. Now, I'm not going to say there's a line around the corner waiting to buy one of my houses, but they don't stay on the market very long, Jay, when I'm done with them because I took the time to build that reputation before I took the time to build the house.
Indeed, and it sounds as though that you realized somewhere along the way that you were making an investment in a future of brand value, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yes, you nailed it.
Okay, so what flipped that switch? When did you consciously go, you know what, I'm doing this today, but this is where we're headed, so it's worth sacrificing this margin? Because a lot of people would look at that and because they didn't have that vision or wouldn't understand that vision, they'd be like, Frank's silly. He should be doing it this way. But you had your eye on something in the future. When did that come about?
I did, and maybe that was just because I couldn't see myself cutting corners. I wouldn't say I was a real estate artist from day one. I'm too new. I started it when I was in my 20s, so what do I know? But let me fast forward to why it's important to take that approach. And you nailed it. You nailed it when you talked about branding. It's really, really important that most of the people, not everybody, most of the people on this podcast understand the importance of personal branding. You must set yourself apart in your industry. This is an entrepreneurial podcast, right, Jay? It's for entrepreneurs.
100%.
For business owners. Okay. I mean, besides business owners, it is for entrepreneurs primarily. And tune in and get your pen and paper out because this is something I teach this. I impress this upon people. If we had, hours, I would spend hours on this topic. Personal branding is the art of amplifying your essence to the point where your customers, either current or potential, become subliminally intoxicated with you first, then your product. You first, then your product or service. So I'm going to repeat it. The art of amplifying your essence, what sets you apart to the point where your customer becomes intoxicated with that message, with you, the messenger, and then shortly, almost like in immediate rapid fire succession, your product next. And now, why is that important? In almost any industry, it's not important in the beverage industry because Coke and Pepsi are not personal brands; those are corporate brands. It's not important in the tissue business because Kleenex is a corporate brand. But it's important in the real estate investment business because there's so many people in it. How do you set yourself apart if you think about it? Okay, I'm really overrated. I am really overrated. I am in a business that's very kind of mundane. If you really strip away the real estate artist and the Maverick, daredevil real estate developer and all these titles, I'm a developer. I'm a builder. How boring can that be? Don't say that around me either, because I'll correct you. I'll say I'm not a builder. I'm not a developer.
Right.
I'm an artist. And so I've spent my entire career amplifying my essence, what sets me apart, this artistry, this artistic approach. And that's added value to my dollars per square foot that I sell my houses for. I hope you guys are focusing on this. And you can take that to whatever industry you're in.
And that's what I like about it. You've added something. You've added you to the real estate piece and found a way to package and sell and make that happen. And I guess what's really going through my mind is like that transition point. I mean, like I said earlier, Spider-Man, he wakes up one day and realizes, oh, this is where we need to go. You wake up one day and go to the millions of dollars of homes. Like what was that transition point? What was that like? What helped us to make the leap with you?
It's really, I mean, it's a little bit. If I could be, if I could be a little, well, let me give you the acronym. You know what an all-terrain vehicle is. You know what an
Yeah.
all-terrain vehicle.
Uh-huh.
What's
ATV.
the acronym? All. What is it? Say it again.
ATV.
Authenticity, transparency, vulnerability. Remember that. Authentic, transparent, vulnerable. ATV. That is a wonderful way to approach your life and anymore in today's society, today's marketing world, universe. It's really important to take an authentic, transparent, and vulnerable approach. And I'm going to give you an answer that's ATV to your question. What
Okay.
was the turning point? I am and have been addicted to excitement since I was a 12-year-old. And there was a time in my life, in my mid to late teens, even into my early 20s, that addiction to excitement was self-destructive. And it could have been collecting speeding tickets and not paying them because I had a fast motorcycle that I loved to take 130 miles an hour and get caught and collect speeding tickets. So I was wired with this personality that at that age I needed a main line of adrenaline. I mean, like jam the needle into my arm and whatever was exciting, good or bad, and back then it was pretty much self-destructive, I did it. So I realized after a bumpy start, a very bumpy start, 4 high schools in 4 years, a 1.8 grade point average, many stints in juvenile detention, because I had all this misdirected, self-destructive energy that was pursuing excitement in the wrong direction. Jay, in my early 20s, I swore off all unhealthy vices and temptations because my mentors didn't do them. And so I was going to copy them. I was going to, emulate them. My superheroes didn't do that kind of thing. And I started to live like a more disciplined life. I found a creative outlet. I should say, not, well, creative. I found a constructive instead of destructive outlet for my need for excitement. And let me translate that. So I build houses without a buyer. I don't know when I'm going to get paid. I could be either, flying across the country in a private plane one day, or I could be eating out of a dumpster the next day. So to me, that's if I don't perform and I put that risk out there, like repeating, this is my money, me, the bank, and the IRS. Those are my partners. I have no other partners. And if I don't succeed and the bank takes my house away, then I do eat out of a dumpster. So I found the way I was wired is this needing this excitement. This is my career. What I do for a living is extremely exciting to me. And it feeds that need. And oh, by the way, it's very constructive. So that was a turning point that I found an outlet for a gift. Like I do believe that people are who doesn't like excitement in their life. I mean, most people do. I needed a little bit more than most, and I found a constructive outlet for it.
And in fact, you've done 43 of these?
I've done yeah, well, not counting all the little ones, but yes, 43 oceanfront houses in the last 25 years, which really isn't a lot. If you think about it, I mean, 43 sounds like a big number, but 43 over 25 years, that isn't.
Well, that actually leads to my question, is because I was wondering, like, how does this process start? Do you scout a location first? Do you wake up with an idea for a new type of house and go, okay, this is what I want to do next. This is going to be my new canvas and the materials I want to experiment. How does that process even begin for you? How long does it take, like from an idea to inception, to make that work?
Well, my market, my territory, my niche, if you will, I choose to carve it a little deeper and a little wider than most. Meaning, I don't deviate outside of my niche, except for my books. I write different genres. But when it comes to real estate, Jay, I put 3,000 miles a year on my car. Okay, everything is really close to home.
You could walk, is what you're saying.
I mean, the longest project I've done from where I live is 8 miles away.
Got it.
So the direct oceanfront in Palm Beach County, Florida, there are only roughly 160 opportunities for me to build on the direct oceanfront. So if I only have one, obviously, if you take 43, actually I'm doing my 44th now. So 44 divided by 25 years, it's basically 2 a year, right? That's not a whole lot. So I have one under construction usually and one completed. When one sells, the one that's under construction finishes, and I go out and look for the next piece of property. It's not easy to find. I mean, that the inventory is my lifeblood. But because I know the market so well, and again, the big picture lesson, no, not everybody listening to this podcast is in real estate. The big picture lesson is carve your niche a little deeper and wider than most. Stick to where I could go in. I could go to south of France, Malibu, Beverly Hills, Bel Air, Hawaii, all these high-end markets. I stay in Palm Beach County. I know my market. I know where to when a good opportunity comes up on the buy side. Like in real estate, you make your money the day you buy, not the day you sell.
Right.
If I buy the opportunity right, I've made money like an annuity on day one. And I only make that money, Jay, if I stay focused on carving that niche a little deeper and wider than most.
You know, what this leads me to believe is that you have to be. I've done, rehab projects that, primarily on apartment buildings, as small as 8 units, as large as 180 plus units, and, commercial buildings. I've done a number of different things. But the one thing that keeps coming up every time you speak right now is discipline. You've got to be one of the most disciplined individuals on the planet because your parameters are so narrow. You know so deeply. I can only imagine. Like, would you consider yourself disciplined in this way?
Here's a good thing you just said. So my parameters are the world. I could go anywhere, right? I could go anywhere. I know affluence. I'm basically fluent in the affluent, right? I know how they think. I know what they want. So I could go anywhere. The discipline, Jay, comes in. I don't choose to go anywhere.
Right.
All those things. I want to stay right here because this market. Not only do I know it knows me. What does that mean? That means that if I'm going to make this a quick story, but that means that if Jay's parents lived in an oceanfront home that they bought 30 years ago, and Jay's parents died, and Jay inherited the home, and Jay didn't want this old rundown 30-year-old oceanfront house that's been beat up by the salt ocean, and they do fall apart if you don't maintain them. Jay just says, look, I don't want this house. I inherited it. I just now inherited a $5 million piece of property. The house is worthless, by the way. It's just the land. Because Jay knows Frank McKinney buys things like that, he might call Frank first and not even call a broker. And Frank and Jay may make a deal where, Jay just came into something that may be worth $5 million. He just wants his money. And Frank offers him $3 million cash just to close quick. No realtors. It's a windfall for Jay. He just came into $3 million, but Frank just made $2 million on the day he bought it because the market knows me.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And it's just I've run into a number of, especially out here in California, I've run into a number of people who specialize in the higher end markets. There's one person I'm thinking of right now who only does, these, what I'm like, I still can't imagine it, but he does, $2 million to $5 million condos, and those are his flips. And I'm just like, that's just so much. I interpret that as a lot of risk. That's why I like apartments, because I feel like I'm diversifying my risk amongst hundreds of tenants. But I've got to understand how you view risk. That's why I'm asking. That's why I'm saying what I'm saying, is because you have to view it in a completely different way in order to make this work without having a heart attack every transaction.
Two ways I see it. One is quality of life related, and I'll get into that in a second. But the other, because remember, if you got 100 units, you might have 99 people calling you telling you your toilet's clogged up and all that. I want quality of life. I'm not a buy and hold person. I can speak on it to a limited extent, but I am a buy, add value, and then deliver that value and move on to the next. I'm a project specific person. I like to do and move on. So the I just lost my train of thought. There were two reasons. Oh, risk. Gosh, listen, if you're listening to Jay's podcast, and the only reason you're able to listen to it is if you included your wife or your spouse and said, look, honey, please let me listen to this. Listen how great Jay is. And your spouse or significant other has no interest in this, but you do have interest in living a fulfilling life, a full life. And Jay, taking risks, no matter if it's the president of the Tupperware Club or building multi-million-dollar oceanfront homes, the amount of risk that you're comfortable taking, you got to think of risk is like exercise your risk tolerance like a muscle, like going to the gym. You exercise that risk tolerance, and you know what? Eventually, it becomes stronger and able to withstand greater pressure. So people who think what I do is extremely risky, it may, to them, it's their definition, it may be. But here's how I see it. The reason that people don't risk, it's not the risk itself, it's the fear associated with the thought of taking the risk. Not the actual taking of the risk, but the thought. Like you just said, I can't imagine doing a $2 million condo. You said that you used the word imagine.
No.
So you're thinking about it. It's almost like on a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
The thought of it getting to the top
Yep.
and dropping scares the crap out of you. But when it drops, what happens? We become excited. So here's follow my logic. So
I'm with you. I'm doing the best I can, because I can do the $2 million apartment complex, but a $2 million condo is like, what? And so I'm on the way. I'm at the top. I'm at the crest. We're going down now. Now we're going down.
We're going down. Well, we haven't gone down yet.
Oh, okay.
So no, let's not go yet, because remember, it's fear. Fear is what stops us. It's not the risk. It's fear. But risk is where it started. The thought of risk produces the sensation of fear. Risk is always associated with a big change or a big challenge in our life. That change could be financial, relational, spiritual, dietary, workout program, going to church. Whatever that risk is, it's a big change or a big challenge. So for me, yes, it was a big change and a big challenge to go from a $100,000 house to a $2 million house. But I had conditioned my risk tolerance, Jay, over 5 years. So that the biggest risk to me was the first $50,000 flip. Because I had a good career. I was a tennis instructor making $100,000 a year as a 19-year-old. I was doing really well. I left that behind to go buy a crack house that had used needles and used condoms in it. Like it was a bad place. Once I conditioned that risk tolerance, like it is today, the biggest risk for me is not taking one. Because I'm so conditioned to it. But the last thought on this whole risk thing, I'm afraid every day of my life. I am afraid every day of my life. So I'm still feeling the fear associated with the thought of taking the risk, and that risk being a big change or big challenge, like my running across the desert, my ultra marathons. But when I feel that sensation of fear, Frank McKinney's afraid every day of my life, I know I'm moving forward. I know I am taking a big change or a big challenge, taking on a big change or a big challenge. I don't want to be to the end of my life knowing that I will have regrets. And everybody listening, you will have regrets. You want to regret what you did in life, not what you didn't do. I want to regret trying, like that race that we might talk about, my ultra marathon. I've tried it 11 times. I've failed 4. I've made 7. Not every real estate deal, Jay, have I made money on. I've lost some money, but I want to be out there swinging.
Yeah, I can that I can relate to totally 100%. Now, in addition to doing doing well, you've also taken on doing good at the same time, because there's also the thinking out there that the two are mutually exclusive, meaning if you do well, you can't do good and do well simultaneously. You have to choose one or the other. And yet with Caring House, you've proven that that's not the case. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, there's a simple way to sum that up, and don't let this scare you if you're not into this kind of thing. But there's a Bible passage that I happen to live by, which is the greatest life mantra that anyone could choose to live by. It's from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, verse 48. To whom much is entrusted, much is expected. To whom much is entrusted, much is expected. And for those of you who are, when I say the word Bible, you tune out, forget that. It's a life mantra that happens to be a Bible passage. If you're a believer,
I love it.
Then it's a Bible passage that happens to be a great life mantra.
Absolutely.
Either way, it works. And that to me, Jay, is why I started Caring House Project Foundation, that builds self-sufficient villages in the world's Western Hemisphere's poorest country, that being Haiti, where we combine housing, food, water, renewable food, I should say, water, schooling, orphanages, in a campus-like setting. I built 27 self-sufficient villages in the last 16 years, providing shelter, as you said in the entry, to over 12,000 children and their family. So why? But here, 1.8 grade point average I came out of high school with, right? I'm a simpleton. I am a linear simpleton thinker. I provide housing to the world's most wealthy. Shouldn't I be providing housing to the world's most desperately poor and homeless? It's that freaking simple. That, to whom much was entrusted to Frank, much is required of Frank to be able to take that professional gift, to build these beautiful mansions and design them and all that I'm really, really good at, and share that on the spiritual highest calling, my spiritual highest calling, being creating these self-sufficient villages in the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere.
I love it 100% because I love everything about it. It's funny that you said that. I appreciate you being willing to share that, because people ask me all the time things like, where does your inspiration come from? What's the greatest, book? And I'm like, dude, you don't understand. The Bible's the best business book on the planet. Just read it. But I can relate to where you're coming from. And I've got to understand, because again, you had choices. You could have chosen, like you made a strategic choice to choose, oceanfront and the ultra wealthy. You made that choice. That same type of decision had to go into, and keeps going into, because this is I think this will be your 27th and 28th village that you guys are working on now. You've made this choice 26 other times for Haiti. Why there? Why? I mean, you could have chosen anywhere to make the difference, but you've chosen here.
Okay, so let's go ATV again. Authentic, transparent, vulnerable. In the late 90s, I was reading an article about myself having sold the most expensive spec house in the history of Palm Beach County. At that time was $15 million. When the newspaper comes out and you're in it, you're pretty excited, right? You want to go make sure they quoted you right, your hair looks right, your clothes, the house, everything. When I grabbed that article, and this is back when we read newspapers like, the old-fashioned way, not online, on the other side of the page where I was featured was a homeless man being fed out of the back of a beat-up old Econoline van out from underneath the I-95 overpass. He looked a lot like me. There, but for the grace of God go I. Why was I on the right-hand side of the page feeling like, I'm going to have to say it, I'm going to use one time, I don't like cursing, I felt like shit in my life, Jay. I was depressed. Right. Is this all there is? After all I've worked, I feel I have no heart in my soul. None. I am void of any joy in my life. Yet my garage is full of cars, my closet's full of clothes. I hadn't discovered my spiritual highest calling. To the detriment of our spiritual highest calling, most people on this podcast will pursue their professional highest calling, as I defined by you doing something a little bit better than most to put food on your table. Not better than everybody, but what do you do a little bit better than most? And I can answer that by saying I build oceanfront homes. I don't do better than everybody, but I do it a little bit better than most. That's my professional highest calling, but that's all I cared about. That's all I cared about. And I was very self-centered, narcissistic, and I didn't really focus on, Frank, you have a mind, you also have a soul, and there's a reason it feels so shallow and empty, because you haven't nurtured it. And I learned this from one of my mentors. And so when I read that article, I went and volunteered at that soup kitchen, because I needed to find out the answer. Why do I feel so terrible? Why do I feel so bad when I should be on top of the world? And the answer was clear. I was too self-centered. I wasn't sharing God's gifts. I wasn't living up to Luke 12:48. And so I started feeding the homeless 1 hour a week for about a year. And Jay, my book, The Tap, which is a spiritual book that is based on Luke 12:48, I felt the tap. I felt God coming down, tapping me on the shoulder, calling me to more. And God wants us to be responsible stewards. God said to me, Frank, I've given you so much. You barely made it out of high school. You're in juvenile detention. You're building, and you're being selfish. That's why you feel terrible. So I answered that tap. That's what my book, The Tap, teaches you, how to recognize life's great tap moments and then act on them. And had I not acted on it, Jay, by going and simply volunteering for 1 hour a week, there wouldn't be 27 self-sufficient villages in Haiti.
Yeah. I'm chuckling because you and I are coming from the story. Anyway, there's just so much that I'm resonating with. I get it. I understand it. And I appreciate you being willing to use whatever platform you have been given to go out there and spread the message, because that's just not always the case, and I just think it's amazing. It tells me that you are the type of human being that more of us should strive to be, and I definitely appreciate that. Now, for those that have listened this far, and want to find out more about what you've got going on, what's going to be the best way for them to catch up with you?
Okay, so we talked about the Caring House, the charity work in Haiti. We talked about the houses I built on the ocean in my early start. The books, all the books. I have one of the best websites you can visit. If you are bored and you don't want to watch Netflix one night, go to my website, because there's video upon video of the villages we've built, of the tours I just came off of. I just did a 25 city tour. I went to 25 different homeless shelters and soup kitchens and food pantries in support of my newest book. All the books are on my website with sample chapters you can read. You can take tours of these houses I built. I mean, these are not like those crappy little video virtual tours. These are like coming attractions movie trailer tours that you can take of not only the ones I've finished, but ones I have under construction. It's very simple. Just remember frank-mckinney.com. So it's my first name, Frank, F-R-A-N-C, dash, not underscore, dash, McKinney, McKinney.com. And have at it. I mean, it's its own little version of Netflix. That's the best way to connect, because you can also connect with me on there. All my, links to Instagram and all the social platforms that I use are on there. But that is, we spend a lot of time, a lot of money on that website so people can be thoroughly educated and entertained, and not spend a dime, by the way, unless you want to.
And having gone to your website, I personally I believe this is your new house, or the newest one that you're doing that's featured on there. I personally love that the garage elements and the staircase. I was like,
thank you.
I keep looking at those two pieces in particular over and over. I'm just like, wow, how can I get that in California? Anyway, I just can't do Florida. But nonetheless, I as we wind down, I've got a question for you, because I'm curious to hear what your answer is going to be, because you've spanned so many things. You've done so many different things in order to just live out your purpose. I've got to hear what you would give and what you would say as a point of advice, because here's what I know. I know that someone listening has gathered the strength from listening to you today, and they go, you know what? I can do it. I'm gonna go do it. They've reached that point of decision, Frank. They're probably even standing in front of what I like to call the superhero outfit store. They're ready to pick out their cape and tights, and they're gonna make this thing happen. But I think you know this very well. When we reach these moments of decision, oftentimes there's a companion. That companion comes in the form of a voice, and it's a voice that reminds us of how it didn't work last time. And oh my God, you're going to do what? How on earth are you ever going to write books and build spec homes? And then you're going to take care of how many people in what country? You're going to do what? I mean, because these are the thoughts that go through our heads. And then for some people, they're actually related to that voice. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend that this time it's going to be different. They're going to do what you say, Frank, and they're going to follow through within the next 24 to 48 hours. What would you suggest that they do?
That voice that you're talking about, we know what that voice is. We spent a minute on it. It's fear. You must recognize fear. Don't try not to be afraid. It's okay to be afraid, but recognize that voice for what it is. And that voice is trying to take that other four-letter word, risk, and convince you not to do it. My question to you is, where are you going to be if you don't? Where are you going to be if you don't try? You may fail. You may fail at this one, like I've failed many times. But when that sensation comes back, that fear comes back, which is me telling me, that voice on my shoulder, my little guy on my shoulder saying, don't take the risk. Where will I be if I don't try? I don't want to be in that nursing home drooling all over myself at age, 85, having known that I didn't take that risk. And the other thing I want you to do when you decide to push through the fear and take the risk is have what I refer to as a healthy ego when you do it. A healthy ego is defined as follows: believing that you're just a little bit better than most at what you are about to do for a living or are doing for a living. A, B, not being afraid to tell the world about it, right? I mean, we can't be afraid to sit back and tell the world that, hey, I am really pretty good at this. There's a way to be humble and still extol your virtues. There's a way to make sure that you express that belief in yourself, that healthy ego. I'm a little bit better than most at what I do, and I'm not afraid to tell the world that that I am a little bit better than most. And I have a passion for what I do. Like, I really believe in what I do. You're not going to get off the dime unless you do those things. And I think that, here we are I don't know when this is going to run, but here we're coming up on the end of the year, or we're just into the new year. And what if you don't take that risk and you let fear win out again? Where are you going to be this time next year? You don't want to be in the same place. I don't care if it's just risking walking across the street. Take it, because Jay, I am a lot less. I was a lot less connected, way less financed, certainly way less educated, no college. Many things working against me, but the one thing I had working for me is I wasn't afraid to take a risk. And look where it got me. I mean, there are people that are so much more connected to many other things, funding, financing, education, but they won't take the risk. I'm going to beat them every day. You'll beat me in a debate contest. I'll beat you in a do contest.
Ooh. That I knew the answer was going to be awesome. And I love it because at the end of the day, your pedigree isn't overly important. What is important is what you do with the talents that you've been given. And that's where I tend to focus is, everyone listening, we've all been given at least one talent, and our job is to double it and make it into more. So, and you have definitely have done that, and I appreciate the example and the continued call to follow and to make sure that happens. And I thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge, your wisdom, and your insight here with us today at the Cashflow Diary.
You guys are lucky listening to this. I'm telling you, this guy, Jay, I just met him. He's fantastic. I'm going to tune in from here on out. Jay, your content, your questions, and your ability, your willingness to live it. To whom much is entrusted, much is expected. You're living it. You've been entrusted with a lot. You're bringing this content to people who need to hear it. Hey, if Christ was walking the earth now, he might be having multicolored hair like I do, and he might wear these outrageous clothes. He'd be caring for those less fortunate, without judgment, without MSNBC versus Fox. I mean, it would be just one unified effort, and that's who I get behind. I want to be behind somebody like that. I want to emulate somebody like that. That's why you guys all need to tune in to Jay whenever he's on. I'm telling you, you're kicking it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean today? That means get over to frank-mckinney.com. Why? Because you want to see some beautiful houses. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Plus, he's a man on a mission. Support it because it makes a difference, not only to those receiving, but to those who have the ability to give. And at the end of the day, I think you picked up on 2 homework assignments. I know many of you've probably already grabbed your copy of Blink and you've read it, but hey, when's the last time you looked at Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? Because apparently it's a marketing book. At the end of the day, guys, here's what I know. We're all on this little globe practicing our crafts, so let's just go improve. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.